We don't have 20 years to build a 20-year architect anymore. We have to become much more explicit and intentional about building their skills and capabilities. You have these millennials and Gen Zs who have to accelerate into doing work at a higher level and more complicated than you would have asked somebody with 5 years of experience to do in the past. Like, as a matter of survival, firms have to accelerate, their learning curve.
Welcome to the AEC Growthcast from PSMJ Resources, hosted by President Gregory Hart. This no theory, no fluff episode shares real takeaways from the top AEC experts who know what works in today's competitive market.
Hello and welcome to the AEC Growthcast. My name is Greg Hart, president here at PSMJ Resources. Thanks so much for joining us for this episode. In this episode, we're going to talk a bit about knowledge management, but I think what we really are looking at for an overarching theme of the episode is creating institutionalized and really scalable value in an architecture engineering firm. Like we say every time, it's the AEC Growthcast for a reason. We're talking about growth and development and what that means, the good and the bad that comes with a growing firm. It's going to be a great episode. And with that, we will get right into the metric of the month, which is a pretty simple one. It's just the number 3 this month. We just have the number 3. And 3 is the number that represents the percent of first generation firm leaders who responded to our survey, our kind of quick hit poll, if you will, on ownership transition, who reported that ownership transition was easy, right? Now that's pretty obvious. So only 3% said it's easy. Again, first generation firms. But what was kind of interesting and what I thought was a cool visualization of something that we've all kind of known anecdotally, does it get easier with time? That is to say, does it get easier with each subsequent generation of ownership? And the answer from this data is yes. So when we ask that same question of is it easy, hard, or neither, 12% of the second gen said it's easy, right? Still not easy, still only just a little close to 1 out of 10 that actually said it's easy. But then 37% of firm leaders beyond the second generation of ownership, so third, fourth, whatever the case may be, said that it's easy. 3 to 12 to 37 shows you that it does in fact get, I don't know that it's ever easy per se, but gets easier as you move through the generations. Why is that? There's a few different reasons. By and large, once you get into second, third, fourth generation, governance is more institutionalized in the firm. There may or may not be a formal board of directors, but there tends to be more structured corporate governance, more formalized buy-sell agreement, which is effectively the playbook that governs stock transactions. Tends to be also, I think, more documented eligibility criteria. Just start to put a box, if you will, around what the requirements are to become an owner. So that starts to ease some of the friction that comes with ownership transition. The other piece I would say is the capital mechanisms are kind of built out in the firm more than ever. Affordability is a big, big challenge in ownership transition. We're seeing valuations keep going up and up and up. And it's always been a challenge getting next generation folks to be able to come up with the capital. You never want to just give them the stock. When a company's been down this road once or twice, they tend to have more structured capital mechanisms in place, whether that is company assisted financing, company facilitated financing, various buy-in programs that take some of the pressure off of that. It isn't that kind of first generation founder centric model looking to get out. The leadership development sort of channels tend to be a little more institutionalized in a second, third, fourth generation firm ownership model versus the first gen. Future leaders tend to be more groomed for leadership roles before equity discussions are even entertained. For the firms that said it's challenging, which again was the majority in any of those buckets you looked at, 2 of the things that were often mentioned were developing future leaders and dealing with the affordability issue. We're starting to get away from any sort of running the business by the checkbook. So we have cleaner financials. So we have a better accrual basis kind of perspective on how the firm is being run, which tends to kind of lead to more predictable revenue, which also allows for more predictability in terms of stock redemption liabilities and looking at when there could be a big redemption coming down the pike and looking at the capital that could come in from other future potential owners. Doing that kind of modeling tends to happen with larger, more sophisticated firms. No overwhelming majority is saying ownership transition is easy, but does get easier with time, which is good to see. So if you are first, second, third generation of firm, any sort of place, you should always be thinking about having an ownership program in place to keep the firm well capitalized, first and foremost, to create a vehicle to allow for reasonable return on investment for folks getting out of the firm, for exiting shareholders, and certainly the ability to create an attractive, feasible, sustainable ownership model for incoming owners coming into the firm, new equity holders. So that's the metric of the month. We'll be slicing and dicing that data a little bit more and coming up with the report, and that'll be available on psmj.com at some point, but a little bit of the highlights on our latest research on ownership transition. Now, we are going to shift gears a little bit and get into our discussion with Chris Parsons of Knowledge Architecture. Chris is the founder and CEO of Knowledge Architecture, one of the leading voices, I would say, in helping AEC firms make smarter, more strategic knowledge management decisions. Their flagship product is called Synthesis, and that's an integrated intranet, LMS, AI-powered search solution built specifically for the AEC industry beyond his day job. Chris is also the host of the Smarter by Design podcast. So if you haven't already, look that up and subscribe to that. It's got the KA Connect conference, which is the Knowledge Architecture Connect, their annual conference. As if that weren't enough, Chris is partnering with us on our 2026 AEC TalentMAX conference, as we've gotten more and more comments from a lot of you saying knowledge management is becoming a big challenge / opportunity. What started as just kind of a recruiting HR conference has morphed into knowledge management. So recruiting, knowledge management, learning and development, employee engagement, all things related to people, which is kind of at the heart of this business. So with that, let's jump into my conversation with Chris. With me today, I have Chris Parsons, founder and CEO of Knowledge Architecture. We're going to talk a little bit about knowledge management today, because that is something that we had a lot of misconceptions about what it was for many, many years. In some respects, from day one, when you start your firm, you're managing the firm's knowledge somehow, whether it's the best way, the worst way, or somewhere in between. What is changing in knowledge management? Why is it, I was joking with you, but it's 5 years ago, I sort of never heard the term. And then in the past few years, I started to hear it more. And now it's coming up in a lot of executive level conversations. What is it? Why is it changing? Why is it kind of rising up as a more critical issue these days?
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously we're knowledge-based businesses. So that is one of our core things that we have as a business in terms of assets in AEC. AI is the catalyst for why we're talking about it now. And the simplest way to explain it is, if you want to have good experience with AI, you have to have really good data and really good knowledge. It's a foundation that powers it, right? So you can see the fanciest demo in the world of how AI is going to help you. But if your firm's, not only it's like project history and its knowledge, but it's like your processes, your way of working, your values, like all that context that can help AI actually get to the outcome you're looking for, it all points back to having good knowledge. And so you're seeing this renaissance for knowledge management. I've been calling it knowledge management 3.0, because there have been a couple little renaissance moments before. So that's kind of, I think, the catalyst. But there are these other, you kind of alluded to some of these industry trends. One of the biggest ones, not only do we have baby boomers retiring, but we have that missing generation. I'm a Gen Xer, and a lot of our peers left the industry, kind of in the .com crash in the kind of 2001, 2002, 2003 era. And then after the housing, crisis in 08, 09. So you have this large generation of people retiring, you have a missing middle, and then you have these millennials and Gen Zs who have to accelerate into doing work at a higher level and more complicated than you would have asked somebody with 5 years of experience to do in the past. Like, as a matter of survival, firms have to accelerate, their learning curve. And at the same time, buildings are more complex, codes are changing faster, there's a ton of new design technologies in the office, client expectations through the roof. We're doing more with less. So these are all knowledge challenges. And so how do you prepare that next generation to be able to be capable of taking on the load that we're going to need to throw on them for our industry and our firms to survive? So I think that kind of critical, like that set of problems, plus there's AI technology, the video technology has gotten better. So there's better video capture, video editing, clipping. And so that's a fast way of transmitting knowledge. And then AI can search all that video too. You see this renaissance because there are all these challenges, but there's all these new opportunity, and we're just kind of exploding into, I think, what will be a golden era for knowledge management AEC.
It sure does seem that way, because finding talent has always been a constraint in the industry, and it's only getting more pronounced, I think, for a lot of firms. We often talk with our consulting clients about the Hourglass Org Chart, where you have sort of the baby boomers at the top, millennials, and then There just weren't a lot of us to go around in the first place.
What I've been hearing from our clients is that the apprenticeship model is broken. Some people would argue it was always kind of broken, but like it's extra broken now in that it takes too long for somebody to become a competent architect or engineer or project manager because they're learning one project at a time. They happen to work with this project manager who happens to tell them these three things. And then the project, like it's just very slow. And so what we see firms doing is in a response, and it was kind of like tacit knowledge, meaning it was just in people's heads. It wasn't written down. And so the way your career developed kind of really was highly contingent on what projects you could put on and who you were working with. And you kind of develop this Swiss cheese knowledge of the industry and the technical components and how to work with clients that like, if you were lucky, kind of got filled in, but like maybe you end up with some gaps. And what I see firms doing is like, look, we don't have 20 years to build a 20-year architect anymore. We have to become much more explicit and intentional about building their skills and capabilities. And it can't just be one project at a time. Like if you're new to healthcare architecture, we need to teach you the different equipment. We need to teach you about user groups. We need to teach you the different kinds of codes and the room layouts and like all this stuff. Like we know these things. We just need to write them down or turn them into videos or turn them into courses so that we can intentionally upskill you faster. So that you're prepared to handle more sooner in your career, which by the way, that generation's ambitious. They're here for it. Like they want to do more sooner. And so like, that's also a thing is like their expectations out of work and out of the technology and having immediate access to knowledge because they grew up with TikTok and Google and YouTube. Like the internal expectation to have that kind of delivery of knowledge is ramping to meet both the challenge, but then also the expectation of that generation.
When I first started hearing about knowledge management several years ago, it was largely in the context of employee engagement and employee retention, that younger generations were wanting more training and development opportunities to grow their careers. The first few years, I wasn't even thinking of it as much from the firm benefit perspective as it was from the employee engagement. Am I a little isolated on that one?
So we've been doing knowledge management as a species, whether it's cave paintings or in our industry, like rolls of drawings or books. Like we have been doing knowledge management as a species. We maybe didn't call it that, but that's how you do it. And anytime you have you start with one person, even remembering what they know, but then you add a second person, a 10th person, a 30th person into an organization and scale from there, having the company be able to not have to make the same mistakes over and over again. Like this is an old idea. So when tech came in, this is kind of the internet kind of explosion. It started really simple. We were taking all those binders and file cabinets and digitizing them into databases, into searchable intranets to try and make it easier to kind of capture and make that information easier to move around the org. So that's kind of like the late 90s, early 2000s is when really knowledge management became a thing that there was a conference around it. People started writing books. So it's got like 25 years of like being a field. Then when Facebook and LinkedIn and Twitter exploded, the social media explosion kind of in the 07, 08 range, that to me was knowledge management 2.0. We started then, our company. So like I had built intranets at 2 architecture firms. As soon as I saw what was happening out with enterprise social, I'm like, we should bring that technology in-house to help us share knowledge between offices more effectively. So anybody can write a post, anybody can get an answer. You don't have to get approval. Pre-2007, 2008, like you had to run through somebody who knew HTML. They have to like add a page and it's all routing through one person to get knowledge. You can imagine how poorly maintained and updated internal knowledge bases were just because they were so hard to use. So in 2007, 2008, they got easier to use. This was a cultural shift. Like this was about democratizing who's allowed to ask questions, who's allowed to answer questions. Like this is how you move knowledge. Like here's what I learned on this project. Hey, there's a new technology. Does anyone know a person who can help me with this problem? How do I handle this flashing condition? Like it just unlocked all of this knowledge sharing across the firm. And then that all remained and became searchable as part of a long-term archive. So some of it was knowledge sharing, but some of it was engagement because it got used for internal communications and letting people know what's going on and all the kind of things. So that was the kind of KM 2.0 era. It's funny to think like there was a lot of resistance to that when it first happened. A lot of people were afraid. It's like, well, what do you mean anybody can share? Like, what if they say the wrong thing? What if they say something offensive? And that seems kind of quaint now because we've just gotten so used to these tools. They're everywhere, but that was actually a big cultural shift. And so that's kind of the journey we've been on until OpenAI really kind of exploded onto the scene with ChatGPT. And now it's been like, well, how do I take advantage of that knowledge capture that we did in 1.0, knowledge sharing we did in 2.0, and now it's all about retrieval. And so we've gotten all this stuff. How do I get the answer out of all of these resources that we've captured? And that's what AI has been so good at for knowledge management. It can search across videos and documents and pages and conversations, and it will just kind of pull out the little pieces and parts that are relevant to you and stitch together a dynamic, personalized answer. Like this is what we've been waiting for in knowledge management all these years that we've been working in it.
The other thing that seems like it's been kind of a misconception is this isn't really just for if you got to do a proposal on, a university research facility in the Southeast, how many of those have we done? That is part of it, of course.
Sure.
But it's so much more than that, right? In terms of actual knowledge, not just project portfolio kind of stuff.
Exactly. Like we've got a client named Bora. They're an architecture and interiors firm in Portland, and their director of sustainability has built out an amazing knowledge base. He's actually taken the book that he wrote and put that into their knowledge base. And so they say like, hey, I've got a client. They're in San Diego. The building is going to be oriented east-west. Like I'm trying to figure out the window to wall ratio. Also, what should we think about with indoor air quality in this kind of condition? And based on that knowledge that they've captured, the AI can reason over that incredible knowledge set and come back to them with really good answers, but then also citations and links to go deeper and validate that information. Like amazing. So for Corey, who's their director of sustainability, it's kind of created this digital ambassador for him within the firm that's available 24/7 to answer like level 1 and level 2 questions. He still then can take the hard questions or like consult and mentor and like do more research and development. So it's not like that's going to replace the need to have experts within the company, but those experts will be able to be so much better leveraged by kind of learning new things, but not have to answer the same question over and over again, which is very exciting.
That I think gets back to the learning and development piece where, employees want more than just a paycheck and want a place where they can learn and develop. What are some of the use cases you're seeing on that side of it, where they're kind of really leaning in on the L&D piece of it?
So we started our journey in 2009, and we were an intranet for AEC firms, and we just kind of were building and did that for over a decade. We had to do a massive project to basically take our product to the cloud, and so after we finished that, kind of in 2002, 2003. I did a listening tour with like 85 clients and like an hour long. And I'm like, okay, we've just built all this stuff. We didn't have any roadmap going forward. What would be helpful? What would be useful? Like, what are the things you're struggling with? What could we help with? Is it technology? Is it not technology? Like it was really open-ended. And two things came out of that. One was AI, like you started to see this was coming. It's like, this is going to be important. We don't exactly know how. We don't know what we're going to do with it, but like something there. And then something around learning and development. And what I had heard was some of the things we talked about earlier, like we're having to accelerate people's learning faster than ever. And our current kind of best model right now is the hour-long lunch and learn. You know what? We do this really advanced thing. We record it and we put it on our intranet, and people can go back and watch it later if it's useful. And that is kind of, I'm being a little unfair, but not very unfair. That's kind of the state of the art in most AEC firms now. And so they're like, there's got to be a better way, right? We have to be able to get on-demand stuff that's shorter, that's routed to the person when they need it. Hey, people don't need to watch an hour-long lecture. They need to get to minute 45 and watch 5 minutes of it because that's what's relevant to the problem they're trying to solve right now. Because in the past, you had to consume like things in a linear format, right? You had to read a document from top to bottom, watch a video from start to finish. You go sit in a class for 2 hours, 4 hours, you go start to finish. Like we're in this world now where it's much more dynamic and kind of combinatorial. So we can kind of assemble the things that you need to learn. And so as we started talking about this with our community, people got very excited. So we built a learning management system into Synthesis. It's integrated with the intranet. And then we laid AI search and now knowledge agents on top of that. So we committed to having a much bigger vision for what we build because we saw that's what was going to help our clients go where they want to go. So to your question about like what kind of use cases, we went into beta last summer. And number one is onboarding. Like people just do not like the way they're onboarding their employees into the firm. They try and fire hose them within a day or two and give them so much information they're never going to remember. So like, how can we spread that out over maybe an hour a day over 7 days, and then in 2 weeks, and then a month, and then 60 days, and then 90 days, and just try and drop things in a much more kind of digestible format, but then also have it available to be search and retrieve when you need it, because you're not going to remember what they told you on day 2. Design technology is huge. There's so many new technologies in the firms. And so being able to like understand how to use them, even what they are, is like a level of understanding. Just at a flyover level, like what are the 30 tools and when would I use each? When project management would be the third. I mean, where do I start? Every year, firms try and turn new people into project managers that have never done it before. And there's so much ground to cover because, you know, obviously there's the kind of hard skills of project management, but there's all the soft skills that go along with it too. But then people go through project management training, but then don't apply 80% of it. Like, so let's say you get through like fee negotiation or something like that, but you get dropped into a project that's already well underway. It's like, okay, cool. So I don't get to apply my fee negotiation skills for another 9 months until I'm on the beginning of another new project. How do we get people the right learning at the right time so that they can apply it? I think about the knowledge managers and the learning and development people in our community as like air traffic controllers. And they're constantly trying to land the right knowledge on the right tarmac to the right person so that they can get off. Like there's all these people and all these topics, and how do we play matchmaker? And technology can be great at that. It's not to say that humans don't have a hand in it, but it can be really good at understanding like, look, you've never been on a job site, you know, before. Maybe we need to get you some like job site safety, you know, for example, or something like that. So yeah, it's like taking all the like macro, like what is knowledge management, right? All these things the firm knows, how do we connect it to the right person when they need it? And most of that means you have to capture it, and it just can't be living in people's heads. And then you can use technology to distribute it more effectively. That's what we're really excited about right now.
It's come so far in what seems like not a very long time that, and maybe like you said, it's the AI piece that's sort of been the catalyst for that. But it's really, I mean, this seems like we're getting to a place where firms are really running the business on their knowledge. And like you said at the outset, I mean, the knowledge is what these businesses are built on. Any AEC firm is built on your knowledge, individual or collectives.
And the half-life of knowledge has continued to shrink. So, you know, what it was like to be in practice 30 years ago, even 10 years ago versus now, it's like the pace of change is ramping. And you're right. Like, you know, you think about it, what does an AEC firm really need? It needs employees, clients, money, and knowledge, right?
Yeah.
With clients, we've got marketing, business development. With employees, we've got HR. With money, we've got accounting and finance. What are we doing about the knowledge piece? And in general, it's kind of like, I don't know, some kind of like ad hoc informal thing. And so I think that's the enlightenment that's happened, is people realize we need to be as intentional about this as we are about those other things.
One of the things that we're seeing is as this generational change happens, the next generation that's coming into leadership is just saying, hey, look, we want to preserve everything that's built the company, but we want to build it more to be a sustainable, scalable business and not just be a practice. And you're right. We often look at the business to practice continuum and say, you know, pure business it's a little bit of a bell curve, and either edge of that continuum is maybe not where a lot of firms live. Are you seeing that in terms of firms that the kind of leaders are coming in and wanting to kind of mix up?
So our newsletter and our podcast is called Smarter by Design. And the reason we named it that is we believe that firms should invest in much as designing their business as they do in like buildings and infrastructure and bridges and whatever it is. Like business is a design problem, and your firm can get better outcomes, become more adaptable. It can thrive by designing the business. And I think you see that like when people realize that, it's like, oh, this is also interesting. Like this is also design. This isn't just some like thing I have to do so that I get to design and engineer things. Like business is actually interesting. I feel like we're seeing that kind of, and maybe it's some dividing and conquering, right? You've got maybe a partner who's a little bit more design client focused and another one who wants to, you know, build business. But I think even at that level, I don't know, I just think overall, I think there's kind of this idea that it's not a dirty word to talk about business. It's not a dirty word to talk about sales. Like I feel like a lot of those things that used to trip people up in our industry, I just feel like they're going away, which is great.
Talk a little bit about first steps, best practices. I'd imagine there's a whole bunch of data cleanup that, you know, garbage in, garbage out a little bit.
I always tell firms that are going on this journey that you cannot manage all the knowledge in your firm. There's too much. So it has to start with prioritization. And it could be, you know, you want to enter into a new market or a new service. And so you want to capture, and you've got one person that does it, you know? So it's like, great, we want to do more of what Greg knows how to do. How do we interview, work with him to help transfer that knowledge to other people so we can run 10 projects at a time, not just 2 or 3? So it could be that. in terms of scaling expertise. It could be integration. So you mentioned like we've acquired a firm. Great. How do we take advantage? How do we have 1 + 1 = 3 here? And we bought a company ostensibly because of their knowledge and their relationships. Like, how do we actually take advantage of that capability? It could be that you have a bunch of quality issues. And what you need to do is work with your QA and CA teams and find out like, well, what are the things that are going wrong in design? And can we educate them to know to do better design in the beginning so we don't end up catching it out in the field? And so whatever these kind of like core business challenges are, it could be about winning work, doing better quality work, winning, keeping your employees retained. You could be employee engagement still. I mean, that's still a thing. It's like, how do we retain somebody and not have them leave to go to tech or to go to a larger company? So you start with those core business challenges and you work back to, well, what's the knowledge you need to unlock and support that? I mean, that's kind of like one vector of it. Obviously, you want to do this kind of base foundational, like you need your employee handbook and all your IT stuff and like your standards, like that kind of stuff. You just want to organize that and make it searchable. But like big picture, like new knowledge creation and acquisition, you wanted that to be strategic. That's fun work to do.
How do you download some of that knowledge that lives in a lot of heads and get it in some sort of institutionalized platform?
Yeah, so there's a couple different ways to start talking about this. This is a topic we could go on for hours, but like at a high level, I think one of the challenges is experts don't know what they know. They have the curse of knowledge. So they just do it. They've been doing this for 25 years or 30 years. It's just like, I don't know, like how would I teach somebody to do this? So one of the techniques, there's a great book called Critical Knowledge Transfer by a woman named Dorothy Leonard. It's like one of the best books I've ever read on this subject. And we did a project with her where she worked with 4 of our clients and we just kind of like, how do you adapt her methodology for AEC? And the big thing I took away was you get them talking about projects. You kind of do behavioral interviewing for them, right? It's like you talk to their peers and their peers say, well, Greg's magic trick is these 3 things. Like he does this thing better than anyone else. Like, let's say he's great at listening to clients and uncovering their hidden needs, like not what they're saying in the meeting, but like, what do they really want in this project? So great. It's like, I hear, Greg, that's your superpower. Can you tell me about a project recently where you were able to discover an unspoken need that a client had? It's like you keep asking these why and how questions of like how somebody did this special thing, and then they can uncover it. But if I just walked up to you, Greg, and I'm like, how do you uncover unspoken client needs? Like you wouldn't have access to that. Like it's not kind of top of mind. It's like deep tacit knowledge.
When you're getting that info and digging into that, is it then getting kind of formatted into some sort of how to uncover unspoken needs that is then getting loaded in?
In some cases, it's like, I'm going to produce an asset like a checklist, but then we're going to have you record it. Now that you know what it is, and it took you 90 minutes or 60 minutes to stumble your way through it, we can probably distill that down into a 5 to 8 minute knowledge tip, or a short or something like that can be assigned in the learning management system to new project managers or new people that are going out in business development. You can make it searchable. So operationalizing it, I think, is the question you're getting at, is really good. We've seen clients, so that's one way, is to interview them kind of like that way. LS3P does this cool thing they call expert hours, where they peer an expert in the firm with somebody who doesn't know anything about what they do, like someone from the marketing team, to just have them explain it to them like they're just a normal civilian. And like, again, that kind of like having to answer that, like, wait a minute, you just called it a whatever acronym or jargon you use. Like, what is that? Well, how would somebody know how to use that? And so there's this technique in both of these of like, you pair somebody who's kind of naive with the subject with an expert, and you make them kind of like actually say it all, because experts just get going really fast and speak in a kind of a shorthand. And you need somebody who kind of represents the person that will be the learner who will be hearing this for the first time. You need someone to be their representative in the room and asking those clarifying and kind of dumb questions. You need to be someone who is humble enough to not like, to understand their role is to not know, right? But my kind of point is like, generally experts can't do this on their own. You don't just point them at a video or like give them a document and say like, here, write it all down. You really need to work with them to help tease it out.
Who typically owns the knowledge management piece in the org? Is it in the C-suite, HR, marketing? Where do you typically see that sitting?
What's interesting is my answer in the past would have been, it depends.
Yeah.
And I would have told you that there's 4 different places that it typically lives, and kind of depending on the strategy of the firm or whatever. It is like making a really marked move to operations in the last year and a half. Like, it's really stunning to me. Like, that's where it seems to be going. And I think it's because some of these changes that we've been talking around, where you've got learning and AI and knowledge all integrated together, operations, COOs, director of operations are seeing like, this is my leverage to make our company be able to accelerate our team faster, deliver higher quality projects. Like, This isn't like a side project that the CIO is running, or that HR is trying to just engage. Not to say that CIO shouldn't be involved, not to say HR shouldn't be engaged, but I'm seeing more and more knowledge and learning reporting up through operations, which I think is a very good sign. Marketing is a huge stakeholder. They have a whole subset of they want to use the firm's knowledge for winning work and doing the marketing and writing, doing the comms and the brand stuff. They will always be a huge stakeholder. So whether or not they own it or not it depends on the firm, but marketing is a huge player in this.
What's the kind of first step you think if a firm was kind of thinking, how do I get my arms around this?
I'll say 3 things. If you're trying to do it on your own, I think that thing I said 10 or 15 minutes ago around starting with your strategy. Now, not all firms, I realize, have a written down strategy, but you still have a sense of these are the 3 to 5 most important things or challenges our company has as a business. Work backwards from there, saying do we have the knowledge we need? Or let's say we were to bring an AI agent into our firm and be able to ask it questions to help us with this. Would it have the knowledge it needs? Do we have the course? If I were to say on demand, someone go learn to be an XYZ, do we have the knowledge we need to achieve our goals? That you could do kind of a self-assessment. We have a methodology for helping you if that's something that would be good. Second, I would say get involved with the communities. So just kind of getting into our ecosystem and learning. On our website, there's just tons of past talks and intranet tours. We are a very knowledge sharing organization. There's a lot you can learn from other firms. And then of course, if firms want us to help them with it, we could do that too.
You'll be at AEC TalentMAX, right, at the end of May. You'll be doing a launch keynote and facilitating a panel all about sort of the new learning and development kind of mindset.
We're talking about this as a modern learning organization. So we think that L&D is going to change more in AEC in the next 5 years than it's changed in the last 25. And in order to take advantage of all these new technologies we're talking about, we think firms need to change and become more intentional, yes, but then provide not only the resources like we talked about to capture knowledge, but give experts the space to share their expertise and help scale their expertise. A lot of times for experts, they feel like that's an extracurricular activity that's just thrown on top of an already busy product load. And so I think these modern firms are figuring out part of the role of being a senior PM or a senior technical expert in the firm is creating knowledge and sharing knowledge and scaling that, right? Not just being at a 90% utilization rate and cranking out as much work as possible. That's optimizing for the short term and not the long view. So
for sure.
Yeah. So TalentMAX, we partnered with you guys to do kind of a knowledge and learning track. So I'm going to do a keynote. I'm also going to do a general session panel, but we've got 5 firms who are sharing detailed case studies of knowledge and learning management. These are all firms pushing that modern, kind of approach to it and running a bunch of experiments. And I was with several of them last week. It's really exciting to see what these firms are working on.
What's in Chris's crystal ball looking out 5 or 10 years from now? Where do you see knowledge management going? What's kind of out in the horizon? What are some directions you see this thing taking if we're sitting here 5 years from now?
One of my favorite quotes ever comes from Jeff Bezos. And when he gets asked this question, his kind of go-to line is, well, I usually think about what's not going to change, because that's really helpful. And I like that. So when I'm thinking about what we're investing in, we've invested heavily in learning and development, both the technology, but also, in terms of process and how companies can get better at it. I think 5 or 10 years from now, that's going to be even more important than it is today. I think being able to take advantage of AI and having the knowledge AI needs, but then the literacy to say, we're building agents. The AI agents are going to be into synthesis in Q2 of this year. They'll be the first generation of agents. Agents will continue to get more semi-autonomous and then autonomous and will be a huge part of how we work. It's been said that employees will oftentimes manage an agent before they manage another human, right? And then you'll need to manage agents which manage other agents. So this whole capability of understanding how to manage AI. So I've got learning and development, understanding how AI fits in, but then how to really manage it and leverage it and have it just become part of the core operating system of the company. I think those two seem very, very clear to me as key trajectories. It's never a better time than now to start knowledge capture, because it's only going to get more and more valuable as it goes on, and you just want to get started. So I see knowledge management as having a very bright future. It seems very central to what we're trying to do.
I hadn't thought much about the agentic piece in knowledge management until you just said that. But I could see that being a huge.
Anywhere from writing, which is a huge one, but again, writing, but grounded in your firm's knowledge, your firm's voice, your firm's history. That's a lot different than going out to ChatGPT, right? Imagine an agent that can then do more and be a sustainability advisor to teams and is always on. Like you just keep going through all the parts, design technology. Like what if it's an AI tutor that helps you learn new software so it understands and can ask you questions? And I'm like, I'm not getting this concept, so I'm going to give you some more instruction. You seem like you've got this one fine, so I'm customizing your learning journey for you. Like that picture of like connecting the right person to the right knowledge at the right time, that's still going to be the North Star. We're just going to have all kinds of new technologies that help us get closer and closer to it.
Yeah. Exciting times.
Indeed.
All right. Well, we will see you at TalentMAX in May, and your website, knowledge-architecture.com, to learn more about KA Connect, learn more about the podcast, Smarter by Design, and all sorts of other cool stuff that Chris and the team are up to. So awesome. Chris, thanks so much for joining me.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Thanks. All right, we're back. That was a great conversation with Chris. Knowledge management is becoming a hot topic for a lot of the reasons we've talked about in that conversation. And it's something that has the potential to really be a force multiplier in your organization, especially if you're one of those firms going through one of those first, second, third transitions of ownership or leadership. So hope you enjoyed that. I also want to talk about real quick the Anthropic spider plot that has everybody abuzz in the industry. Anthropic came out with this spider plot. What they did was took a whole bunch of industries and said, here's the theoretical potential adoption of AI in that industry, and here's the actual adoption of AI in that industry. And of course, that creates a delta by industry. Some industries have a lot of potential adoption, and they're starting to get more actual adoption, maybe administrative industries. Others, low potential adoption, construction, right? There's a lot of physical labor associated with construction, so you won't see a whole lot there. So AE got a little bit of attention because we were one of those ones with a high potential, low actual. And I won't get into the details as to why. We talked about that a little bit in the last episode. I don't want to rehash it. The Anthropic spider plot, just Google that and you'll find 100 articles and people complaining about the visualization of it, as well as chiming in with opinions on the data. So now I want to move into our 5-minute fix. This is the part of the show where we take a question from a PSMJ Pro member and we dissect a little bit in 5 minutes or less. If you're not a PSMJ Pro member, you can learn more at psmj.com. We'll include a link to it in the show notes as well. If you're a PSMJ Pro member, keep those questions coming. We do enjoy them. And this one in particular, I got not just from PSMJ Pro member, but from 2 or 3 others as well in the past month in various phases of this challenge. And the question is this from the PSMJ Pro member. Our 47-person MVP engineering firm is starting to grow to a point where we feel like we need SOPs and process and structure to manage risk, as well as to create fairness and consistency, but we're nervous that will morph us into everything we hated about the large firm that we left. It's getting hard to handle the firm with the recent growth, and we don't think our process and structure is able to support it where we're at now. What should we do? So very common question. This comes up a lot from firms, especially recently, just because there's been so much growth in so many corners of the AEC industry that it's kind of outgrown the founder-centric model. The Vern Harnish quote he has in his book where he talks about management and the equivalent or the parallels to parenting. He basically says about kind of creating process and structure. He talks about establishing a small number of rules, so not a whole bunch, but a small number of rules, repeating them frequently, making sure that everybody feels like there's a fair and equitable playing field when it comes to the rules. Another way to look at it is from PSMJ founder and CEO Frank Stasiowski. So Frank's angle is more about don't create a whole bunch of rules that are just going to stifle and wet blanket all the creativity in the firm, but rather create a set of core principles that are effectively the underpinning of the firm's success, okay? So create those principles, then kind of get a leadership team that subscribes to, follows, preaches those core principles. And then it's sort of this flows throughout the organization from the top. I'll give you an example. Rapid responsiveness, right? That responding to client inquiries, questions, proposal, anything like that quickly. Maybe you even do prescribe, within 24 hours or something to that effect. That gets a little more of a rule than a principle, but you get the point. Rapid responsiveness, which ties into the client experience, can be a huge differentiator if you practice what you preach and actually follow through with that. But what we really need is some core principles that we can get people to kind of follow. You're at a point, kind of this inflection point in the organization where informality kind of stops scaling, right? You can only run informally for so long, and that's very common, especially for a founder-centric firm. But you're also at that point where bureaucracy has the potential to just like wet blanket kill everything that has made the firm successful. So I think consistency is important, whether it's the core principles or the small number of rules that you establish. If you're not applying them consistently, forget it. Nothing is going to work. I think there's also a caution there to make sure you're not solving for one isolated incident, whether it was an expense issue or a risk issue, project liability issue, fee setting issue, whatever the case may be. One issue with one person, now you're going to create this whole set of rules that everybody has to follow. So in a lot of cases, you might say this is one piece of communication we need to deal with to address one isolated issue. It doesn't require a huge kind of undertaking around policy and process and structure and all that. The other thing I would keep in mind is to kind of look at it. You're not trying to overstructure the organization. You're trying to kind of mitigate some inconsistency risk. We need to deal with an inconsistency that's either eroding margins, exposing the firm to undue risk, or damaging the client experience, okay? So then you start to boil down to what are some specific things that we got to deal with? Is it different PMs pricing jobs differently? Is it different contract terms being accepted? Is it variable QA, QC rigor that's happening? Is it an uneven client experience? When you start to reframe it a little bit and start to dial in, you'll often isolate a few little things that you need to address or to tackle, right? There's the 80-20 rule, with 20% of the activities that you standardize or create process around will probably alleviate 80% of the problems that you might be having inside the organization. The other piece I would put to that is if you're going to establish some rules to address some of those situations, do establish those core principles as well, because Frank is absolutely right. If you don't have those core principles regardless, your firm is naturally going to become more monolithic, more homogenized, or less differentiated from what it used to be, certainly, but as a growing AEC firm. So think about those things. What are the 5 or 7 things, not 20 or 30, 5 or 7 things that really differentiate your firm from the competition, and document those as core principles. The other thing I would add on that too, with any SOP, any process, any structure, whatever the case may be, 2 ways to make adoption much easier and more widespread. Number 1, explain the why behind a process. Whether it's a core principle or an SOP, explain the why. Preferably not in an email, but in an all-hands meeting, or at least in a video presentation to the team, whether it's a project team, the firm, whatever the case may be. Obviously, that scales up or down based on the size of your firm. But explain it. Explain the why behind it. The other thing, you're going to get a lot stronger adoption, a lot less pushback if there's some co-creation involved with that SOP. What do we mean by that? Take some of your highest performing PMs, right? Take some of your strongest principals, some of your strongest discipline leads. Get with them, isolate the problem, and create the solution together, okay? Nobody likes a top-down sort of rule that's just crammed down everybody's throat with no explanation and no forethought as to whether that is actually tackling the problem that is at bay. So think about those things, reframe it a little bit, look at the real pain points, the kind of structural issues that are causing problems, if you will. Address those first. Start small, establish those core principles. You can create some tight guardrails around things like money and allow some loose freedom on execution. And most importantly now, innovation. That's our 5-minute fix. If you're interested in becoming a PSMJ Pro member, we'll include more information on PSMJ Pro. And also, if you are a PSMJ Pro member, go into the portal and submit your question for a future episode of the AEC Growthcast. Moving on. So in our last episode with Heather Polinsky of Arcadis, we talked about this critical push. AI is causing it a little bit, but it's needed to be done for years, that the billable hour is kind of the broken model, right? It naturally constrains the revenue of a firm and the scalability of an organization. There could be a better way, right? In this month's Book of the Month segment, I want to talk a little bit about one of our own. We're going to talk about the value pricing imperative for design firms from PSMJ founder and CEO Frank Stasiowski, the same Frank Stasiowski that we talked about just a minute ago with the SOPs. It was first published in 2013. It's been around for quite some time, but it still absolutely is evergreen and as relevant as it ever could be. If you've read any of Frank's books, you know those are not hypothetical, sort of fluffy, kind of change the paradigm kind of books. These are dirt under the fingernails, what you can do right now with actual data, actual case studies. actual examples and implementation tips. It's a little more of a manifesto for this reinvention of the industry. And like I said, it's been around for a little bit, but it's probably even more relevant now than it was when it was first published. He shares some very specific examples of the kind of what he calls the "of course we cost more" mindset. One of the book's, I think, most memorable points is around reframing kind of pricing confidence, I guess I would call it, where when you get that pushback on fee, and we've all gotten it, right, at one point or another, that immediate rebuttal with, of course we cost more, and we provide the value that you can't get anywhere else, right? You don't want to just do value-based pricing and get to the same place you were with a time-based model. You want to be able to deliver more value so you can charge for more value. And it's funny, whenever we do any sort of poll and we ask who has raised their fees in the past year, a whole bunch of hands will go up. But when you ask, do they regret raising their fees, nobody's hand stays up for that, right? So anybody who's raised their fees gets some real strategic value out of it in terms of if you lose any clients, then maybe we're the sort of low base clients who you want to lose anyway. But at the same time, it allows you to sort of really reframe the value proposition of your firm. So Frank does a great job of walking you through that and thinking about how do we reframe the value that we're providing. And he gives a great example of a geotechnical engineering firm that actually did an A/B split test and kind of offered clients a fixed fee option at a 2% discount versus time and materials. And 75% of the clients chose the fixed fee model. And the result on the firm side was a 35% increase in profit margin compared to time and material projects. So there's real firms that are kind of rethinking their business model and creating more predictability, creating more perceived value, and delivering, by the way, on the quality and service that they promise in the value-based pricing model. He makes the argument innovation leads to higher margins. Competition and commoditization is kind of your enemy, right? But delivering on value isn't just about changing the proposal. It's about rethinking kind of what the firm is bringing to the table, what the firm is bringing to the conversation with a client. So in the context of everything we've talked about today and in the past couple of episodes, I thought it'd be great to dig into Frank's value pricing book a little bit. The Value Pricing Imperative for Design Firms from Frank Stasiewski here at PSMJ. We'll put a link to that in the show notes as well. Do check it out. I think it'll give you some great food for thought. That's it. That's all we got for this episode. We covered a whole bunch of stuff as usual, but again, all under that umbrella, I think, of creating more scalable, institutionalized value in the firm. That's what this AEC Growthcast is all about. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope to see you next time. Thanks, everybody.